Everybody hear me okay? So some of you may have heard this before. I taught this in the college class, high school class. But tonight we're just going to look at a few things that in my opinion, really help make an argument for God, for creation, for intelligent design. So we'll talk a little bit about, well, we may not get off this title page. There we go. Okay. So this will help strengthen our faith and help us defend our faith. And when we have conversations with those who may not believe in creation, it'll help us as we have those discussions. And we're going to take a look at maybe a little bit of the background of people who hold a different view than us. Why is that? All right. So what's an atheist? Just definition. All right. Did you read were you up here before class reading these answers? Okay. What's an agnostic? Whether they believe or not in a creator. Okay. And then we hear the word evolution a lot. What is that word? How would you define that? Okay. Progressive, maybe.
Non-creative.
Do what?
Non-creative.
The process by which different kinds of living organisms are thought to have developed and diversified from earlier forms during the history of the earth. How long has atheism existed? Just within our lifetime, or anybody have an idea how far back you could go? Here's what I had. In Psalms 14:1 and 50:1, the fool says there is no God. That pretty much meets the definition of an atheist. And then you saw this term emerge in the 16th century. And then the atheistic thought appeared in the 5th or 6th century in Europe, India, China. And agnosticism, if you look at Acts 17:23, it's the Greek word agnostos, means unknown. And this thought appeared in the 5th century, starting in India and Greece. At least that's what my studies have indicated. If you study this, you'll find different information. What I've got is to the best of my ability, what I believe is right. We're going to talk about, you talk about the age of the earth and things like that. There's lots of different suggestions or answers to how many years it took for the earth to evolve, how old is the earth, things like that. So I haven't found where like an atheist will just have one hard, everybody agree to this, like how old is the earth? There's different numbers that you'll hear from them. All right, so first of all, do you think the number of non-believers is on the rise or on the decrease? Increase or decrease? Why? Why do you think it's on the rise?
Social media, I think it's just being bombarded in the head through different schools, through the classrooms and things of that sort. I think that's why a lot of it's on the rise.
Social media, education. What's some of the other reasons you could think of? Hollywood. What else? Anybody have any others? I think there's more. So, someone's family life could influence how they believe or not believe and how they're raised. We mentioned education, different religions, different teachings tied to politics. Look, I'm no expert or anything like that, but if I look at the younger generation as a whole, it seems to me that, take it or leave it as far as religion. Yeah.
Well, some of it down to selfishness.
Yep.
Because people want to do what they want to do, how they want to do it, when they want to do it.
Yep. I believe that's part of it. You know, I think it was Ted Turner. At one time, he was a believer, but from what I've read, he was no longer a believer. He took an atheistic view. Anybody know why? I think it was his wife who died, and he couldn't understand why, like God would take his wife from him, therefore there must not be a God. So, a crisis of faith. And then another term you hear a lot now is people aren't so much religious as they are spiritual, okay? So, lots of reasons why the non-believers are on the rise. Why might a person deny God and creationism and align with it, with atheism and the theory of evolution? Why would someone do that?
They can be the center of their own universe.
Center of their own universe.
An answer for what they're doing.
They don't want somebody telling them that you can or can't do something. They don't want to feel guilty. They want to do what they want to do and not have a bad feeling about doing that. Okay? Anything else? Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Did everybody hear that? That's a good one that Toby brought up. Someone wants to lead a certain lifestyle. It goes against religious teachings, so they will just become an atheist, and that's how they'll justify continuing in the practice they want to be involved with. Here's some of the reasons that I found. Someone may have been taught, about atheism or evolution. They just grew up in it and never questioned it. I mean, we could get accused of, well, you grew up in the Church of Christ, your grandparents, your parents, and you never questioned it. And you ought to question it. I mean, you could sort of flip this argument, but some people, that's just how they grew up, how they were raised, and they never questioned it. And then peer pressure, family pressure, and we don't want to be held accountable. It's the culture. We talked about that a little bit. And moral independence. Person uses emotions to make decisions. Like the example we talked about, something bad happens and blame God. And some people say that there's no evidence to believe in God or creation. And then, finances. Those are just some of the reasons, but just thinking about why would somebody take this view can be helpful in your discussions with someone who takes an atheistic view and believes in evolution. All right. How does, give me examples of how atheism and evolution teachings enter our everyday lives. I'll go first. 30 years ago or so, our kids were young, and I believe it was a Sunday night after church, we went to Wendy's. And at that point in time, the Happy Meal came in a sack. And this particular sack had dinosaurs on it. And so, of course, you can imagine what the first thing it says was millions and millions of years ago. So it starts that way. So even in a 5-year-old's Happy Meal from Wendy's, it's there. What's other ways that it enters into our lives?
Always front page news that they found a missing link, but then after some further study, when they find that it was actually not true, or it was a pig bone or a donkey bone, they do not retract it in the major media outlets. It's never retracted.
I think you could. I get those notes from the Weather Channel, from news coming across my iPhone almost every day. There's something it's about that deals with evolution and showing that it's true and the discoveries that have been made. How else? Anybody take a big vacation to Orlando? Where'd you go? Disney World. But you ever ride the dinosaur ride there? I don't even know if it's still there or not, but it's throughout the park. What do you see? Yes. Yeah. We've even been on a boat ride in Maine, and we're going down the coast, and there's this rock formation, and the guy who's telling us about things as we go past him said, and these rocks were formed so many million years ago, and this is the only. I mean, it was just nonchalant. Nobody batted an eye. But I mean, it's just pretty much everywhere you look, right? What about TV shows, advertisements, college? So how many, like when I was going to high school and college, I really didn't have to, this wasn't a thing. I wasn't confronted with it very much at all. And how has that changed like today? It's sometimes it may not affect us as older Christians, but I think we're not doing the younger Christians a service if we don't study and have the ability to give them some answers and examples and facts that help refute, evolution. It's something we didn't face, may not be top of mind for us, but it's a different environment totally for our kids. Have you ever been challenged or had a discussion with friends or colleagues, and you're talking about atheism or evolution? Anybody ever have that conversation? Did anybody have a conversation? How did it go?
This is my training on Voyager, where it took me 3 weeks to save this much material, and I studied with that person, and that person believed that there's a heaven, but there's not a hell. It's like a dog. You're dead all over.
Yeah.
They didn't believe in hell.
Right. That's a fairly common belief held by many.
Hey, Kevin.
Yeah,
Most of us here grew up in a different age than what people are right now.
exactly.
I mean, I grew up down in the South, and evolution was out there, but it wasn't in any of the schools.
No.
You may have had a few that were teaching it, but we just weren't confronted with it
Right.
on a day-to-day basis like
Right.
people are today.
Yeah. And that's what I worry about us, being there to support our kids and the younger generations about the things that they're facing. So, the first time I had a discussion with someone about evolution and belief in God, I just, it didn't go well at all. So when we have a discussion, whether it's about evolution, or about the existence of God or anything else, and you're having that discussion and it doesn't go well, what should we do? one of the things we need, you do need to plant the seed. You need to, I totally agree with leaving them things to think about. Sometimes when you have this discussion, it may not go well, but you may have given them something to think about that they probably didn't want to acknowledge or something. So you never know what good your conversation may do, no matter how poorly you think you did in it. But like anything else, if you try something you're not good at it, what do you normally do? Prepare, practice, okay? Do it. The second time I had a conversation with someone, I didn't change their mind, but I felt like I could present the arguments and information much more clearer, and so I think that when we have those conversations, if it doesn't go well, that's okay. You tried, but try and try again. Don't give up. You'll get better at it, and you never know what good work you may do. Is it okay to engage in this types of discussion with non-believers? I mean, you ever heard somebody, I'm not going to talk to them about evolution. I don't believe it, but I'll never get anywhere with them. Is that the right attitude? No. What does the Bible tell us? We should always be prepared to do what? Give an answer. And then you look at Colossians 4:16 and 1 Peter 3:15. Give a defense to everyone who asks. And we talk about how do you come better prepared? You just keep practicing and studying over and over. All right. That's a little background. A couple of other things before we sort of get to the meat here. Evidence. How would you define evidence? We're talking about evidences for God and creation. What's evidence?
I would call it proof.
Proof.
It's a way of providing proof.
Yep. That's just a body of facts, indicating whether a belief or proposition is true or valid. And why should we study evidences? We talked about that already, be able to give an example, give an answer, not an example, but give an answer. And when we study and when we have those discussions, have you had discussions where you felt like you did a better job, or maybe you've learned more and you're able to, really provide good information to the person that you're discussing these topics with? I have. That was the story I gave. It's just, we shouldn't be scared to engage, but we need to be prepared, and we need to practice, study, and strive to become better at it. So do you think believers ever have doubts or questions about the creation or God's existence? Yeah, I don't think it's uncommon. You think about some of the things we're going to study here in a minute, but you think about some of these things that, I remember not being prepared, and I was discussing some of these things with someone, and I ended up, maybe, what if they're right? And how do how can I possibly answer that? The argument they made. Well, you need to go back and study take the arguments that they made and you study. And, that helped. I did that. It helped me strengthen my faith. And, I don't really ever want to be in a position like I was the first time I talked to somebody about evolution and atheism. I want to, they may be way smarter than me, but at least I got some points I can bring up that we can have the discussion about and hopefully leave them information they'll think about. Naturalism, what's naturalism? Or what's some other words for naturalism? Yep, natural causes. Everything around us can be ascribed to natural causes, and it's also another word for evolution, rationalism, humanism, neo-orthodoxy. What do you think we mean by internal evidences? Maybe a little vague, but internal evidence is referring to studying the Bible, studying the claims and doctrines of the Bible, the prophecies, Christ's resurrection, Jesus Christ, especially his resurrection, going to the scriptures. Those are evidences. What would you think external evidences are? Things that we observe. And a lot of things in nature, does give us, helps our faith in Christ. I don't think nature or let me say evolution and, a belief in God. Well, I've heard people say, well, don't talk to them. They're Christians. They don't even believe in the existence of dinosaurs. I mean, it's like you can't make science or history coincide or link up with the things we study in the Bible, which I believe is false. I mean, the external evidences are, I remember, who was it that came and from FC taught the Buddy Payne, and he talked about, and I did terrible in science. So this is really hard for me to stay engaged and try to learn about this stuff. But I don't know if you remember it, but he talked about the cells and how they, when they die, they replicate, and where do they get the information on how they need to replicate. It's just, it was amazing, and that really attests to me the God and his wisdom. That's how he designed us to work. All right, 2 sources for the concept of God. What would you think those are? One is easy. It's what he reveals about himself. What's the other source? Yeah, nature. And then, how does God reveal? We sort of talked about this, but God, how does he reveal himself to us through nature? I mean, I just think like the example of Buddy Payne. Yes. Yeah.
Mexico, to the time 4 or 5 generations come back and they've
Yeah.
never been there.
Yes.
That just blows my mind.
In Romans 1:20, it talks about the invisible attributes are clearly seen. And I think that's what that verse is speaking to. And then God reveals himself through his revelation, through the scriptures. All right. I want to look at some examples here. The argument is from an evolutionist is that given enough time, chance could account or does account for all things as we know them today. Have you heard that argument, given enough time? That's why they go 4.5, I don't know if it's billion or million years, that's when the earth was formed, but I mean, it's time. Time is the argument that they use. So we're going to answer some questions. What happens if the rotation speed of the earth is slower? What happens if the earth is closer or further to the sun? How far, what kind of tilt do we have? What degrees of tilt is the earth? What? 23. And what does that mean? Why is that important? We'll talk about, if the moon was closer, if the oceans were a few feet deeper, and if our atmosphere was thinner. So we're going to look at some of those. And I tried to put pictures. This is really rudimentary, and if you like it, great. If you think it's corny or that your child could do better with a crayon pack, that's fine. Just don't tell me that part. All right, so, sun and the earth and the moon, 93 million miles between the earth and the sun, 239 miles, 1,000 miles, earth and moon. All right. What happens if the earth, say, is 1%, approximately, if it's 1 million miles closer to the sun? What would happen on earth? Yep. So that's 1% or 1 million miles. It's uninhabitable. we couldn't survive. What if the Earth was further from the sun? And let's say approximately 1%. Yeah, ice age all over. Well, I wouldn't say it. I shouldn't say that. See, you got to be on your toes all the time. Yeah, it can sneak in and get you when you least expect it. So, all right, but that's too hot, too cold. It will not support life. All right. So the Earth spins about 1,000 miles per hour. And if the Earth's rotation speed increases by 100 miles an hour, what do you think would happen? Lose weight? What else? I mean, all right, so the days and nights, I don't think I'm using the latest. I updated this chart, and I think this was one that was wrong. Ignore that first bullet there. I'm not going to take the time to get the right deck up, but just start with the land in equatorial regions would go underwater by 30 to 65 feet. A day would be 22 hours instead of 24. Be less time to warm the Earth, increased number of earthquakes and tsunamis, and the polar ice would melt. So that's just if it went 100 miles an hour faster. If it decreases to 900 miles per hour, what happens then? The days and nights are longer. Days get warmer, nights get colder. Extreme weather. Some regions are going to be hotter and drier, and some are going to be colder and wetter. And ocean currents get stronger, which would result in flooding, and you'd have sea level drops. All right. So if we're going to exist and live where we do on Earth, if it gets much more, if we get 100 miles faster or slower, we're in trouble. Does that look like design to you? It does to me. All right, the tilt of the Earth. All right, if the tilt is at 0 degrees, we don't have a tilt at all, what would happen? No seasons. Days and nights would stay about the same length. Higher latitudes would be uninhabitable, and life would be located around the equator. What about if it was a 90 degrees tilt? What do you think would happen? We'd have intense climate change. Northern hemisphere would receive almost 24 hours of sunlight for months. Ice caps melt. So, it's going to have an impact on life if we're at 0 or 90. But it's at 23, which is, I think it's 23.5 degrees, but that's the optimal tilt for us to have life. Okay. The Earth and the Moon. So 239,000 miles. What would happen if the Moon came 50,000 miles closer to the Earth? Pardon? The tides would submerge the continents twice a day. Not conducive to life. What if it was half the distance? You'd have a big discrepancy between high and low tide. Large tidal waves cause flooding. It could cause the Earth to spin faster, and you see an increase in volcanoes and earthquakes. At least the knowledgeable people I read from, this is what they wrote. All right. The ocean. If it was, I didn't know that the deepest spot was almost 7 miles deep, and I didn't know the average depth was 12,000 feet. So that's what we have. Does anybody know why the depth of the ocean is important to us, how it affects life, or how it could affect life? All right. Again, I'm not a science person. I did terrible in school. But carbon dioxide and oxygen, things we need, we depend on, would be absorbed and no vegetable life could exist. And without carbon dioxide, humans would not be able to breathe. And then the Earth's atmosphere. Anybody know how thick our atmosphere is, approximately? All right, it's approximately 60 miles thick and 25 million, again, if you read different sources, you may get different answers, but the one I was reading, 25 million meteors enter the atmosphere each day. Now that could be a particle of dust, or it could be up to a big meteor. What do you call it when you see a meteor hits the atmosphere? If something, what happens when it hits the atmosphere? Burns up. If it doesn't burn up and it comes out and hits Earth, what's it called? Meteorite. Okay. Yeah. But so the meteorites, one source I read this is on an average, 17 meteorites hit the Earth each day, 17 to 47. One had a diameter of 60 feet, and I saw a picture of one that weighed 130,000 pounds. And it was just extremely dense. I think it would have easily fit in this room. All right, so I just thought this was interesting. There's a record of one person being not stuck, but struck and killed in Turkey in 1888. And then there's a woman in Alabama that was injured, came through a roof and hit her leg in 1954. If our atmosphere was thinner, what do you think would happen? Why? Meteorites that'd increase the chances of being hit, but I think, doesn't it also, the atmosphere help keep in like oxygen and carbon dioxide that we need to breathe? So I think we would lose some of that, and it would create problems for us. All right. I don't know if that helps you, but to me, that's just like everything has to be fit together exactly right to give life, to support life. And when someone says, well, 4 billion years ago, two atoms or something collided and all this came out of it, I just don't understand. I don't know if I should let people get away with that comment. That's just so bizarre to me. After you think about, you look at a bird's nest, you look at somebody's written help in the sand on a beach. Everything has design. And for people to talk about, the evolutionists, was not designed, there was no design, it's all haphazard, it's by chance. It's just, when you really study and you think of some of these examples, it's almost insulting, really. Just my commentary. All right. So can you think of other examples that support the design rather than time and chance? Rick? Yep, Jody. Rick? Yeah. Yeah, there's, this is, what I went through is not an exhaustive list at all. It's just things that we observe every day and everybody can understand. But there's much more examples of this. So, to me, the whole point is when you talk about the distance between the Earth and the sun and the moon, you talk about the temperature on Earth, the rotational speed, the tilt, ocean depth, atmosphere. I mean, I don't know what the probability would be for that to everything occur right, properly in order to make that reality, but it's got to be an astronomical, one in an astronomical number of chance that that would happen. So hopefully you can remember this. At least you can, if you're ever challenged, at least you can remember this. You may not be able to recite it to the person you're talking to, but you can remember, hey, there's some evidences here, and I've studied that, and I know that that they can be refuted. You can also use this to refute someone or share it with someone if you're talking to who doesn't believe in creation. But hopefully this will just help, like I said, when you're confronted, you can rely on this. There's tons of other examples. When you're discussing someone, you can bring these up and see how they answer them. And so hopefully that will help you. And I encourage us all to help our younger Christians or younger folks, because they get bombarded with this probably more than we do. And like we talked about earlier, I just think the number of non-believers will probably continue, or those who believe in evolution will just continue to grow, and there'll be more and more. It's just going to be more peer pressure on us as Christians and on our children. Any other comments before we call it a night? Thank you.